Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dig into something big, the dramatic comeback of a militant group that's really shaking up an entire region. We're going to follow the data to understand how the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, managed to do it.
Everything really kicks off right here. August 2021. The world watches as the Afghan Taliban march back into Kabul. In this one moment, well, it completely redrew the security map for everyone, but especially for neighboring Pakistan. It was a turning point that unleashed a brutal new wave of violence.
So to really get a grip on what happened next, you've got to look at the numbers. Back in 2021, the TTP themselves said they were behind 282 attacks. Kind of like a baseline, right? This was the situation before things really took off.
Okay, now fast forward to 2024. That number, it didn't just go up, it absolutely exploded. The TTP's own claims? Over 1,700 attacks. We're talking more than a six-fold increase. I mean, that is just a staggering, deadly comeback by any measure. And you might be thinking, well, that's just their own propaganda. But it's not. Independent data from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED for short, it shows the exact same terrifying trend. They tracked a more than five-fold jump in clashes between the TTP and security forces. So what you're seeing here is different sources all screaming the same thing, a massive, undeniable, and violent escalation.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did a group that was supposedly on the ropes make such a deadly comeback? Well, let's dig in. The clues aren't just in how many attacks, but where they're happening and who's behind them. We're going to follow the data, and it's going to show us exactly where this violence is really coming from.
All right, so the first big piece of the puzzle is all about geography. See, the TTP isn't just hitting harder. They're hitting in totally new and strategic places. And that tells us a whole lot about how their strategy has evolved. So for the longest time, everyone knew the TTP's home base was North Waziristan. That was their stronghold. But the data now, it shows this really clear shift. Their whole center of gravity has moved to a place called Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, why there? Because it's a strategic crossroads, a junction point between three key provinces. This move gives them incredible access to new territory.
And this move, you guys, it just perfectly shows what they're trying to do. They are deliberately pushing their operations out, into Balochistan, into southern Punjab, even into huge cities like Karachi. This isn't random. It's a very calculated plan to stretch Pakistan's security forces as thin as possible across a bunch of new fronts.
Okay, so how are they actually managing to pull this off? Well, to figure that out, researchers did something pretty incredible. They took the TTP's own propaganda, these profiles they released for their killed fighters, and they analyzed 615 of them. They tracked these guys from where they were born to where they died. And this data set, it gives us this amazing, unprecedented look at the human supply lines fueling this whole thing.
And when you look at the data, a really clear pattern just jumps out. Almost all these fighters, they come from one province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or KPK. And from there, you can see these clear pathways fanning out. You've got 23 who went to Balochistan, 16 to Punjab, another 5 down to Sindh. But look at that last number. 82 of them went into Afghanistan. Hold on to that thought, because it's going to be really important in a minute.
Okay, so we know where they're moving. Now let's zoom in a little closer on the militants themselves. Who are these guys? What roles are they playing in this newly supercharged organization?
So a lot of this data comes from the TTP's own tribute series, which they call Razme Mohabbat. And look, let's be clear, this is propaganda. It's a biased, glorified picture they're painting, but it also gives us this rare, data-driven peek inside the machine, showing us their hierarchy, where they recruit from, and how they're structured.
So looking at those 615 profiles, you can really see how the group is built. About 57% are what you'd call rank-and-file fighters. But here's what's interesting. A massive 38% are commanders. That tells you they have a really solid leadership structure, a real command and control network. And then you have the smaller, more specialized group, about 5%, who are the suicide attackers.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. When you start to layer the data, when you look at a militant's rank and where they moved, a huge pattern emerges. You see, the regular fighters and suicide attackers, they mostly tend to move around inside Pakistan. But the commanders, the leadership, they are overwhelmingly the ones making that trip across the border into Afghanistan. Of all the people who crossed that border, a full 47 of them were commanders. That's a huge deal.
And that one fact, that detail about the commanders, it leads us right to the final, and honestly, the most important piece of this whole puzzle, the real reason why the TTP is back. And the answer, as you might have guessed, is just across the border.
You know, the evidence has gotten so strong that the Pakistani government is no longer being quiet about it. Back in March 2024, their Ministry of Foreign Affairs came right out and said it, that some people in power in Afghanistan are actively helping the TTP, giving them a safe place to operate and basically using them as a proxy.
And here's the thing, that data from the militants, it powerfully backs up that claim. Remember those fighters who died in Afghanistan? Well, get this. Of the 84 TTP militants in our dataset who died across that border, an incredible 82 of them were born in Pakistan. These aren't locals, they are Pakistani citizens running their operations from inside Afghanistan.
This safe zone across the border gives the TTP what experts call strategic depth. It's basically a safe haven. It's a place where the leadership, those very same commanders we saw crossing the border, can train new recruits, plan their attacks, and run their whole war against Pakistan without much fear of being hit. This right here is the engine of their comeback.
So what does all this mean? What happens when you have a resurgent TTP that's more widespread and has powerful friends across the border? What does that mean for the stability of Pakistan, and really the whole region?
Well, the threat now is coming from all different directions. The TTP's expansion across Pakistan is stretching security forces to their breaking point. The safe haven in Afghanistan makes it almost impossible to mount an effective counterterrorism campaign. And all of this growing instability, it doesn't just threaten peace, it scares away the kind of foreign investment and economic projects the region desperately needs.
And that leaves us with a really tough and honestly a pretty sobering question. The data makes it crystal clear that the TTP's fight isn't just Pakistan's problem anymore. It's a full-blown cross-border insurgency with deep, deep roots in Afghanistan. Which really makes you wonder, with militants moving so freely across that border, is a stable Pakistan even possible without a stable Afghanistan?